The Cult of Forgotten Friends by Snoo Hobbies 7109. When I was little, I had an imaginary friend. She was a young girl like me, who wore an old-fashioned dress with shiny black shoes and her long dark hair tied up in pigtails. Her name was Cupcake Catherine. No lie, with a K at the beginning of cupcake. I didn't make that up. Cupcake Catherine was really funny about calling her the right thing and spelling it the right way. Anyway, Cupcake Catherine was a fun imaginary friend. We were a lot alike, liking the same stuff, like singing, drawing, reading books, and of course, eating cupcakes. I mean, who doesn't love that stuff, right? Cupcake Catherine and I were best friends. She tucked into bed next to me at night and hugged me so I didn't have nightmares. She went to school with me so that I always felt brave and so nobody picked on me. We played every game together. She would hug me if I was sad and even loved to play the little tricks on my parents. All of my friends at school had imaginary friends too back then. I couldn't see theirs and they couldn't see Cupcake Catherine, but I always thought it was so neat that everyone had this special friend that belonged all to them. Once I asked Cupcake Catherine if she could see the other imaginary friends, but she just giggled and then ran away on the playground. She could be like that sometimes, a little mysterious. When I was about 6, a strange thing happened. My hair began to turn purple, but only in parts. By the time the transition was finished, I had a large giraffe-shaped purple blob in my long brown hair. Now, it's not the worst thing in the world that could happen, and in fact, I really like my weird purple hair now. But back then, it felt like the end of the world to be different. Cupcake Catherine was such a good friend when that happened, and I thought we'd surely be best friends forever. But then, when I was 7, I went to a slumber party. It was actually a party of a girl in my class who I did not know that well. It turned out that she wasn't very nice. When I mentioned my friend Cupcake Catherine, she made fun of me mercilessly in front of everybody and told me imaginary friends were for babies. That was the first time it occurred to me that nobody knew someone like Cupcake Catherine. And I'll never forget watching her that evening, while the girl from class teased me. Cupcake Catherine stood in the corner, shoulders heaving, eyes piercing, face drawn in a terrible frown. Then Cupcake Catherine glitched. No, seriously. She wavered and blinked just like a TV screen or a video game when they don't work right. Cupcake Catherine wavered momentarily between her angry self and a new girl altogether. One with long hair down to the floor, full of stars and swirls of pink and purple, and black empty pits where her eyes should have been. I gasped and reared backwards, but Cupcake Catherine abruptly returned to normal, and everyone at the party laughed at me as I gaped into what appeared to them to be empty, thin air. At that time, though, most of my good friends still had their imaginary friends, and I simply avoided the mean girl from class after the party. However, it was when we were 9 years old, this time at the slumber party of my very best friend Kara, that the other girl kindly told me that imaginary friends weren't real and that nobody talked about them anymore. Once again, Cupcake Catherine stood nearby, glitching between herself and the weird galaxy-haired girl. It wasn't until the next day at home, though, that the fight happened. One I will never forget. I told Cupcake Catherine that it was time for us to say goodbye. She glitched frantically, her face going pale and shadowy with fury. I explained that I love her for all she's done for me, but it was just time for me to start growing up. Cupcake Catherine roared with rage at me, glitching all the while. I cried and begged her to calm down, but she did just the opposite. Before my very eyes, Cupcake Catherine morphed into a horrific beast. Her eyes swelled and fell away from her shoulders, bobbing on a spring, as though she were an evil robot who had fallen apart. Her face contorted and deformed into a fit of psychotic anger. I begged Cupcake Catherine to understand, but she cut me off, speaking in a monstrous voice.
I am not Cupcake Catherine anymore. I am Killer Catherine, and you will pay for abandoning me.
An eerie, distorted song lingered on the air, like an old-fashioned toy winding down to its dead. And then Killer Catherine vanished into thin air. After that, I quickly convinced myself Killer Catherine had never been real. I think it was the only way I could really mentally cope with the idea of something like her existing in the universe, pretending she didn't. I couldn't deal with thinking that there was such a thing as an angry monster out there waiting to exact revenge upon me, so I told myself that my over-imaginative childhood brain had simply made the whole thing up. My life settled into a simple, quiet routine after that, but things in the town where I lived got weird for a while. There was an unfortunate rash of child deaths. Several children perished by suffocation. Medical examination concluded their lungs had simply stopped working, as if turned to stone. There were other weird deaths too, gruesome ones. Some children were caught doing awful things, setting fires, hurting animals, stealing, fighting, all the while seemingly not be in control of their own minds. Still, other terrible deaths occurred. It's almost too horrible to even mention, but it was axe murders. Murder children. Some even suspected the crazy kids who lost control of their own minds had somehow done the axe murders too. So by the time I was 16, life in my town was quite different. My little brother Freddie, unfortunately, had a much different life than I had when I was little. Gone were the days of riding a bike alone in the driveway, or being allowed to swing on the swing set in the backyard, with fears of zombie kids or axe murders. Kids were typically kept under strict lock and key. And then, all of a sudden, when my brother was 5 years old, every single hair on his body fell out. At first it was terribly alarming, but we quickly found out it was a condition called alopecia, which simply means you lose your hair. Some people only lose it in spots, some a little, some a lot. It's actually quite uncommon to lose every single hair, but that's just what happened with my brother. He took it hard at first, but soon he adjusted to the change. One Saturday night, I had my best friends over for a sleepover. Late at night, a frightening conversation started. My best friend Kara asked me, "Stephanie, do you remember your imaginary friend? What was her name? Cupcake Catherine?" It was the first time I thought of Killer Catherine in years, and I shivered at the mention of her name. After a moment's hesitation, I admitted that I did remember. Kara's face was serious and pale. She nodded. "I remember mine too. Her name was Galaxy Gina." Kara's eyes fluttered off into outer space. She was nice for a long time. She had bare long hair all the way to the ground. It was pink and purple and filled with stars. A shiver raced up my spine, and I gasped at the mention of a girl with stars in her hair. Kara continued, "But then when I started to want to stop believing in her, her eyes disappeared. There were just black holes where there used to be, and she did some wicked things." I could barely breathe. "Like what?" I whispered. Kara lowered her voice and leaned in closer to me. The other two girls there with us leaned in closer too. "She stole people's hair," Kara said. "She took the hair of other people to keep her own so long." Her voice dropped even quieter. "It sort of freaked me out when Freddie lost all his hair," Kara admitted. And that's not all. She could steal people's bread, freeze their lungs so they couldn't breathe. Galaxy Gina being gone a long time, but it made me think of her when Freddie lost his hair. Our other friend Leslie began to cry. We put our arms around her and asked her what was wrong. "Well," Leslie said with a trembling voice, "now that you bring this up, it's something I've been thinking of a long time. I had an imaginary friend too, and mine also got mad when I didn't want to believe anymore. He changed. He said his new name was Demonic Thomas, and Leslie shuddered and couldn't seem to go on. "What?" I prodded gently. "What is it?" She whispered in a jagged voice. "He could control people's minds." We all gasped. Then it was our other friend, Alice's turn to make a terrified confession. She was crying hard by the time it was her turn to speak. Mine got mad too. Before she went away, she said she was Ashley Axe, Alice wailed. We all comforted one another until we calmed down, and then finally they asked about mine. I admitted how it had ended with Killer Catherine, but that I had never seen her again. Unlike their imaginary friends, it seemed mine really had been gone all this time. We agreed to keep our secrets and to try and figure out a plan for how to stop the wayward childhood imaginary friends from their path of destruction. It was a week later when things began to spiral out of control. Now I wish I had done more. Told an adult. Tried harder to stop the cult of imaginary friends, but I didn't, and now I can never take it back. I was walking by my brother's room, on my way to my own room to go to bed. I paused when I heard him talking quietly. "No, not that one again. I don't like that story," he said. I paused to listen, thinking our mom was maybe in there with him, but then I didn't hear any reply but Freddy giggled. "Well, alright," Freddy said. "But your stories are strange, Cupcake Catherine." I gasped and burst into the room, fully expecting to see my monster there, but the room was utterly empty except for my brother, who was sitting in the middle of the floor. I rushed in and dropped down next to him. "Freddy, who are you talking to?" I demanded, grabbing his shoulders and shaking him gently. He glanced behind me and then met my eyes. "She says you know who I'm talking to," he said hesitantly. "Don't," I said. "Don't talk to her. You cannot talk to her." Freddy's lip quivered. He glanced back over my shoulder again and replied in a very small voice, "She says not to listen to you." I shook him again. "Freddy, I mean it. Please, you have to listen to me. You cannot talk to Catherine. Her name isn't really Cupcake Catherine anymore. She's lying to you. Her name is Killer Catherine." Big tears shine in Freddy's eyes. "She doesn't like that," Freddy whispered. "You have to go now. You can probably guess how this tale ends, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because nobody else will ever believe me anyway, and I just have to get it off my chest. Please, please just believe me. Never forget your imaginary friends. Never pretend they're not real. Freddy killed our parents. He killed them with an axe, or so it seemed at the time. But you tell me, how does a 5-year-old overcome 2 adults and kill them with an axe? He doesn't. That's another thing. I know it, and you know it too. That wasn't my brother. Either he didn't do it, or he was under the control of something else. Something strong. Something terrible. My brother ended up in an asylum at only 5 years old. I ended up motherless, fatherless, and alone. But even that horror wasn't the end of it. After 5 more years in the asylum, my poor brother died. They called me to come in and collect his things. It seems he had simply stopped breathing, as though his lungs had turned to stone. Heartbroken, I went to the asylum to collect his things. He had next to nothing, basically just an assortment of sketchbooks and charcoal pencils worn to nubs. Inside were scats of depictions of monsters. As I left Freddy's empty room, I turned back for one more look, and instead that I saw them there. The girl with the galaxy hair, an angry boy's surely demonic Thomas, a girl wielding an axe, Ashley axe, and Killer Catherine with her swollen grotesque head bobbing on its rusty spring. Screaming, I turned and ran away as fast as my legs would take me. Wow, what an amazing story, folks. You tell me, are you gonna be forgetting your imaginary friends now, or you're gonna keep them in mind now? Makes you wonder what's gonna happen if you start ignoring them. Well, thank you for stopping by, and sweet dreams.